Though Barron Trump sought to demean Jasmine Crockett in a nationally televised spectacle meant to assert his relevance, no one in the room could have foreseen what would unfold mere moments later, yet another attempt to validate his standing on a grand stage. During a pivotal debate broadcast live from the University of Astoria's Civic Hall, Barron showcased the so-called triumphs of his political journey. Under the searing glow of studio spotlights and the hum of eager cameras, an audience composed of students, analysts, and media insiders absorbed the electricity coursing through the venue. Opposite him stood Jasmine Crockett, poised, unshaken, and fiercely resolute. She stood not only to defend her name but to uphold the very principles she embodies. As Barron strode into the arena, casting a long shadow in the glow of his father's notoriety, he exuded an air of inherited confidence, though untested and hollow. He confronted a woman long underestimated, even by those closest to her. The heart of the debate was integrity, and it quickly became a verbal crucible capable of forging or fracturing public legacies in this era of performative politics. As Jasmine began to speak, a perceptible shift took place within the room's charged atmosphere. The moderator hadn't yet completed his initial query when Barron leaned forward, eyes glinting with calculated mischief. "Well, Congresswoman Crockett," he said with a wry grin, "how does someone with your resume manage to leave such a dazzling impression?" A few stifled laughs fluttered through the audience as Barron reclined, smugly certain his jab had struck. He continued, "Is someone who once styled hair before earning a law degree truly equipped to represent ethical leadership?" Jasmine, untouched by the slight, responded without hesitation. "I certainly do have receipts, Barron. I worked 3 jobs to fund my education and graduated at the very top of my class. I may not have inherited wealth, but I have proof of every step I earned." Her voice was clear, unfaltering. The mood in the room shifted, subtle yet undeniable, as Barron's smirk faltered before he gathered himself. "Nice retort," he replied, "but your voting record paints a different picture. Didn't you once oppose a resolution I supported?" Jasmine countered smoothly, "You're referring to House Resolution 214, which I co-sponsored. Let me stop you there. As I clarified in my Thursday statement, Mr. Trump, I voted against that amendment because it would have stripped funding from public schools in my district, something I could not allow. I realize that nuance may have been missing from your prep materials." A ripple of laughter stirred among the spectators, the temperature in the room unmistakably shifting. "But you must admit," he pressed, trying to wrest back control, "that politics should be more than impassioned speeches and identity-driven narratives." Her jaw stiffened, but her response was measured. "You're attacking identity, not substance. I've been called too loud, too assertive, too emotional. The truth is, if you haven't been branded that way, you're simply not ready. You hope to rattle me with rehearsed insults, but I came here to talk about policy and change. Let's debate that if you're capable." The atmosphere thickened. Cameras zoomed in. Barron glanced at his notes, momentarily mute. The room felt volatile. "If you're here for theatrics, then say so. If you're here to debate, then let's get to it." Jasmine's momentum grew as she addressed the crowd, her voice anchored by generations of women whose efforts often go unseen. Each time a woman, especially a black woman, walks into a room like this, there's an unspoken assumption that she must prove her worth twice over. She paused, the weight of her words filling the space. "But I didn't come here to be underestimated. I came here to be heard." Silence fell, reverent and watchful, as Barron tried to pivot. He gave a dry laugh, masking his unease with forced composure. "Well, this certainly isn't the lecture I expected, nor the one I signed up for," he quipped, wary not to fully derail what was unfolding. The crowd chuckled, and Jasmine, her poise unwavering, replied softly, "No, but it's the one you clearly needed." Barron leaned into the microphone, flashing a tight smile that betrayed his faltering stance. "Congresswoman, I'm sure you've memorized your share of snappy comebacks. That's cute. But weren't you recently under ethics investigation?" The confrontation escalated. Murmurs rippled across the studio. Even the moderator arched an eyebrow. Jasmine didn't flinch. "I'm glad you brought that up," she said, her voice like velvet wrapped around steel. "That's a textbook case of half-truths being used as weapons by those more interested in headlines than facts. Yes, my name was mentioned during a standard audit of campaign finances. It was procedural, no violations were found and no charges filed. And you knew that. You simply hoped no one else would." The crowd buzzed with shared glances and whispers. Barron's usual bravado had soured into something brittle. "Don't paint yourself as the underdog," he snapped. "Don't pretend you're the victim. You're just another politician if you play that game." Jasmine leaned forward with quiet power. "We shouldn't hide behind identity politics, I agree. But when we speak with passion, we're called emotional. When we defend ourselves, we're deemed angry." The room stilled. Barron looked stunned. During my years on the bench, I've presided over cases where everything was on the line, where justice wasn't just abstract, it was immediate and urgent. A hush fell over the audience as though the air itself had thickened. Credibility doesn't require a ballot box victory, he continued, his voice unwavering. I've carried the weight of real cases, real people, families who couldn't dream of affording counsel. And now you think a sensational headline will shake me? The silence tightened, breathless. You assumed I'd wither. Instead, I stood anchored in evidence and unflinching. Fierce as I've always been. I'm not here to play make-believe politics with someone whose crowning achievement is inheriting a name. That landed like a punch. You could feel the room flinch. Barron's expression hardened, his composure slipping for the first time, his face drawn tight with disbelief. Now this has veered into the personal, Jasmine fired back, her words clipped with clarity. And I'm answering because I must. If you care to discuss real policy, I'm ready. Voter disenfranchisement? Environmental rollbacks? Or is this just a smear parade? Barron visibly squirmed as the spectators looked on, their skepticism growing. I think you're relying on theatrics to win, Jasmine declared. No, he countered. I'm winning because I'm prepared. You showed up entitled. Though the crowd had leaned toward Barron earlier, the balance was shifting. Beneath the surface of applause and tension, a misstep brewed. And then he made it. As the electric tension settled into a steady thrum, Jasmine leaned forward, her voice calm but direct. Let's drop the slogans. If you're so steeped in policy, let's dissect some of your decisions. With a flourish, he held up a document clearly rehearsed. You endorsed a budget proposal that aimed to reroute $230 million away from historically underserved neighborhoods and into industrial corridors, all under the guise of federal infrastructure expansion. He stood tall, arms crossed, exuding smugness. The audience stirred, murmurs rolling across the room. This was a setup, he proclaimed. Either you didn't read the fine print or you knowingly hurt the very communities you claim to protect. Boom. He reclined slightly, basking in his perceived triumph. But Jasmine didn't blink. She smiled almost serenely. Page 412, section 17b, she echoed. If you need more time. Barron began. No, she cut in. I'm ready. She stepped forward, gesturing toward the moderator. I didn't skim this bill. I contributed to it. As the screen behind them lit up, she gestured toward the highlighted clause. This is what he referenced, but he omitted that this section only applies to a provisional version of the project. A thick silence followed. She turned to him. What this actually refers to is a temporary emergency redirection clause. If you'd read footnote C, you'd know those funds are conditional, redirected only during certified emergencies like flooding or disaster recovery. Gasps swept through the room like wind through tall grass. Cherry-picking a clause while ignoring the context isn't debate, she said firmly. It's deception. Moreover, she added, I introduced a transparency amendment for that clause. It cleared the Oversight Committee 3 weeks ago. I didn't just read the bill. I strengthened it. A slow clap began at the back, building into an ovation. Barron flipped through his pages, eyes scanning desperately, looking for a counter he couldn't find. The applause swelled, now unmistakably against him. You thought this document would reveal my flaw, Jasmine said, stepping back with grace. But instead, it illuminated yours. You came with buzzwords. I came with substance. She paused briefly, letting her final words breathe. If you intend to lecture others on legislative depth, you'd better start reading the footnotes. Barron looked dazed, like a man realizing too late he had walked into a professional ring without gloves. Laughter rippled through the room, joined by applause and scattered whistles. He mumbled something toward the moderator, but no answer came. Jasmine sat down slowly, composed. Her quiet confidence resounded louder than any raised voice. And just when the crowd thought it had all played out, she added softly. Oh, and the final reveal? That's still to come. A shift had taken place. What began as Barron's confident display had transformed into his undoing. Jasmine had meticulously dismantled his argument with the same skill she applied to legislation. Barron, still attempting poise, straightened. Well, he said, we're still talking about a bill that could increase federal spending by nearly $1 billion over 10 years. That's a burden a lot of citizens worry about. A government bloated on paperwork and promises. During the pause, he waited, expectant, for applause. But none came. Instead, he was met with sidelong glances and hushed murmurs. A quiet discomfort settling over the room. Barron scanned the audience, lips drawn tightly, his poise starting to unravel. This kind of emotional spectacle, he began, voice taut, is classic misdirection. used by politicians like you to dodge accountability and toss around empty catchphrases. Though Jasmine hadn't cut him off, I noticed she allowed him to erode his own footing. Let's not pretend your past as a criminal defense attorney suddenly makes you an authority on economic policy, he added, grasping for barbs that had long since dulled. Jasmine remained perfectly still, letting the silence stretch like a held breath. Then she leaned toward the microphone and murmured, "Do you hear that?" She paused. "That silence. That's what it sounds like when the distractions stop and the truth begins to speak." She turned to the audience and said, "Eventually, when the facts are no longer on your side, you resort to smoke and mirrors." Scattered laughter met her words, along with nods and scattered applause that slowly built. "Let's be very clear," she continued. "You claim to care about fiscal responsibility. Yet when billions were handed out by the administration under the guise of no deficit, you were silent. Why is that?" Her voice rose not with anger, but with righteous certainty. "You point the finger at public reinvestment, at fixing roads and delivering clean water, as if that's the crisis. But the real strain on this nation comes from the top 1%, those who hoard power and wealth, while our communities get crumbs." She shook her head slightly, her expression sharp. "And I find it revealing, every time we talk about uplifting working people, the tone is always too emotional, or too combative. Yet no one critiques the corporations draining the life out of our neighborhoods, treating people as afterthoughts." She scanned the audience, their energy rising behind her, some on their feet. She raised her hand, not to silence, but to steer the momentum with steady purpose. "The condescension in your tone, the little digs at my qualifications. I noticed them. I let them go, thinking you had something meaningful to offer." She waited a beat, then delivered the truth plainly. "But from where I'm sitting, you seem more interested in protecting your ego than protecting the public interest. And the people are exhausted by that act." A ripple of restrained amusement passed through the crowd. Even the camera operator seemed to smirk. Barron didn't speak. He blinked hard, swallowed, then finally blurted, "See? This is why people don't trust politicians. They twist words and dodge the real questions that matter." Jasmine's response was swift and elegant. "No," she said. "You just didn't like the answer." The audience erupted again, this time with real force. Barron fumbled with his notes, muttering under his breath as he stepped slightly away from the podium. He gave a half-hearted scoff. "You're clearly chasing a viral clip. Enjoy your 15 seconds. Jasmine tilted her head, eyes meeting his, her voice like ice over fire. "No, Barron. I'm not here to go viral. I'm here for the truth. And you just happened to stumble right into it." Applause thundered across the space. Something had shifted. Something had landed. She didn't stand. She simply breathed deeply, remained composed, then turned her gaze toward the audience. "What wins the day," she said slowly, "is intelligence and merit, not noise, not name, not manipulation." Her words seemed to echo in the chamber. Barron's usual armor, his certainty, had been pierced. "There's a misconception these days," she went on, "that loudness equals leadership, that wealth equals wisdom, and that a last name outweighs a lifetime of service." She let that settle before continuing, "But real strength comes from standing for the unheard, from fighting for the invisible, from speaking the truth, even when it makes the room uncomfortable." This time no applause came, just a silence so profound it became its own form of reverence. Jasmine glanced down, steadying herself, then looked back up, her eyes softer now. "I didn't come here for a headline," she said. "I came because people I know can't afford the medicine that keeps them alive, because our schools are falling apart, because whole neighborhoods are treated like ghosts by the powerful." She let the moment expand, her voice gaining gravity. "And when people like Barron treat our stories as mere footnotes, I'm reminded why we have to show up, speak up. Every single day we're given breath." The crowd was visibly moved. Heads nodded. A few wiped their eyes. "So maybe tonight," she said gently, "wasn't about winning a sparring match. Maybe it was about reminding people that no matter how loud the noise gets, truth still matters. Facts still matter. You still matter. And in that pause, deep, still, and alive, something sacred passed between speaker and listener. It wasn't applause that followed. It was breath. And in that breath, there was understanding. If you're tired of being silenced, she said, her voice steady but impassioned, if you believe it's time to stop allowing privilege to drown out truth, then raise your voice. Do not remain quiet. Her gaze swept the crowd. If you're weary of being talked over, then speak. Share this moment. Let this be the spark of real change. Then she stepped slightly forward, her tone lowering, now more intimate, like she was speaking to each person in the room, not just the crowd. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Jasmine rose, not in triumph, but with calm, unshaken resolve. As she stepped back from the podium, her quiet composure stood in stark contrast to Baron Trump, who exited wordlessly, swallowed by the silence of defeat. The juxtaposition was stark and unforgettable. When the mic dropped, it wasn't just a gesture, it became a cultural marker. Clips of that closing moment would soon sweep across the internet, replayed with awe. And just off stage, Jasmine delivered what many would call the most powerful line of the evening, broadcast live across the nation. From living rooms and mobile screens, a single question seemed to rise in unison. Did Jasmine Crockett just end Baron Trump's political future on national television? Perhaps she did. Perhaps not. But what's beyond doubt is this: she reignited a national reminder that facts still hold power. That clarity still cuts through spin. And if her words stirred something in you, if they moved you, then maybe now is the time to open the door to a real conversation. A conversation about how we face hard truths without giving up hope. So, if this resonates with you, I invite you to follow our journey. This show exists to peel back the surface, to confront the complexities most would rather leave buried. And this is only the beginning. God bless you. And God bless America.